Welcome back to the Snatch Chat podcast. This is episode 21. We've got a bunch of questions. Let's get straight into it. So, where are we? Here we are. Question number 1. When doing 1 rep maxes, what should be the resting time between sets? Okay. Now, there's 2 different ways that I would sort of approach this, and it depends on the athlete and what their goal is or what they've got coming up. So if you're talking about, say, snatch and a clean and jerk, and this person is looking to sort of compete, or they've got a competition in the next couple of weeks, I would look at having timed rest in between sets. There is no point this person resting 6 to 7, maybe a little bit longer than that, minutes between attempts, okay? Because you're not going to have that amount of time in competitions. Your rest may be really, really short, and then sometimes it may be quite large. But one way to actually start testing your abilities and making sure that you are consistently lifting well at higher percentages with good quality movement, you would try and keep your rest to, say, like 2 to 3 minutes, okay? On average, I reckon that's what your rest period would be, you know, in a comp when you're sort of waiting for, say, 1 to 2 lifters to go before you go. If, for example, the person isn't competing and they are literally just doing a 1 rep max in training, I would look to potentially have a little bit more rest. How much rest do you need to make sure that you feel ready to actually then go and attack that lift? Okay, there's no point going in when you're like out of breath, haven't really composed yourself, and you're going straight back in. You know it's going to be pretty shit. So we need to make sure that we're resting adequately between sets. Now, if it's, say, a back squat or a front squat, maybe even like a heavy snatch clean deadlift, I would look at, or even a push press, I would look at having larger rest periods, maybe 3 to 5 minutes in between sets. Again, that is probably going to be a lot heavier than what we are snatching and clean and jerking. So it's going to take the body a little bit longer to actually recover between those attempts. So we need to have a little bit more rest to actually make sure the body can actually recover. So we have a good chance of actually then pushing our 1 rep max a little bit further. Question number 2, how to get back into training after a week off sick. So you've had a week off sick, or you've trained at the start of the week, you've had a big chunk of time off, and then you go back into training. And again, this is going to vary between everyone. What I would sort of look at doing is the first priority before getting back into training is making sure that we are now regaining decent hydration and decent nutrition. That would be goal number 1. There's no point only feeling good or only just about starting to feel good on Sunday and then going back into training on Monday. We want probably 24 to 48 hours of good hydration. If you've been sick, you definitely need to start hydration. And if you've not been eating because you've been sick, you need to start eating and putting that energy and that water weight and weight loss from being ill back onto our body. That would be always the number 1 priority. That is what we've got to do before then we start to look at getting back into training. When we get back into training, the first things then I would look at doing is scaling those percentages back 5 to 10%. You're working in a block currently 80 to 85%. Your first session at the start of the week would probably drop 5 to 10%. And if it drops 5 to 10%, as that week carries on, all you're looking to try and do is increase those percentages. So by the end of that week, the end of the first week of getting back into training after being ill, you're back at roughly the percentages that you were meant to be at for that week. Then the week after that, that is then when you're looking to sort of like push straight back in. That's what I would say. Question number 3. I keep jumping forwards in the snatch and clean. What usually causes this and how can I fix it? So I think the biggest thing that happens here is the weight comes onto our toes, fraction too early, and then as we extend, we're onto our toes, we end up starting to fall forwards. That's when we start to jump forwards, okay? The weight is in our toes rather than being planted. What I would always say to a lifter that this is happening to, we want to try and stay flat-footed for as long as possible. In the snatch, when we get to the hip crease, literally in your high hang dip position, so you've got a bend in the knees, a vertical torso, bars in your hips, your feet should literally still be planted flat on the floor all the way through, okay? When we go into extension, think about a flat-footed jump. when we land underneath that bar, we land flat-footed. We want to try and be flat feet the whole way through that lift to try and prevent that rocking forwards or rocking our weight into our toes as we go into extension. Really good movement for this. Yes, you've got your no feet snatches and no feet cleans. What I actually think feels better than that, because it gives you time to actually think and feel the changes that you're looking to try and make, would be a slow snatch and a slow clean. Keeping it super, super slow until you get to that hip position or your power position, so you can feel that position where the weight is flat feet in the power position. We look for that flat-footed jump and we look for that flat-footed receive position. We don't want any speed until we get to the hip crease. Think of the hips as like a light switch of power. We don't necessarily need speed in any other phase of that movement until you get to that power position. The power position should be the fastest, most explosive part of the movement. If that happens sooner in that lift from the floor into the power position, 9 times out of 10, you'll get that weight coming onto our toes, especially if you've inexperienced, haven't been snatching very long. Yeah. Question number 4. My shoulders and wrists get really beat up from weightlifting. Is that just part of the sport, or is there something I should be doing differently? So it's a double-edged sword. Yes, it is linked to the sport. You think of the positions that you place your wrists and your shoulders in. Shoulders in the snatch, you're really sort of driving away from it. Very different to anything else that you've probably done in the gym. Catching the bar in the front rack, having that bar overhead, the wrists are taking a battering. That doesn't mean that it should be just, it's normal, it's part of the sport, forget about it. You've still got to look at warming those joints up. If you find that you have, particularly more sort of stiffness in those wrists and shoulders, only highlights that you've got something to do in the warm-up to try and prevent that. Whether that's just padding those wrist rounds on the floor, giving them a nice stretch out, whether it's wearing wrist straps. Wrist straps they're there for support, but they're also good at keeping the joint nice and warm. And if the joint's nice and warm, it moves a little bit more freer, less chance of that sort of stiffness and discomfort in those wrists. But it would definitely be something that I would look at trying to fix in the warm-up. Okay, looking to try and warm them up, improve or reduce the stiffness and improve the mobility of those joints. Question number 5. How important is pulling strength compared to leg strength in the Olympic lifts? I don't necessarily think one is more important than the other. They are 2 very important factors. Pulling strength, moving the bar from the floor to that receive position. Let's take the clean, for example. Bar, or from the floor to the shoulders. To get it there, you've got to have decent pulling strength. But there's no point getting it to your shoulders if you've not got the legs to actually stand it up, which shows us our leg strength is just as important as our pulling strength to actually stand it back up. If I was going to say which one is more important, we need good level of pulling strength. Potentially, we need to look at being efficient and having a larger capacity in our leg strength. The only reason I say that, especially for the clean and jerk, is you got a really strong pull, your legs are letting you down, so it takes a lot of energy to get out the hole to standing up. It's only going to make your jerk harder because now your legs are fatigued, you've got less power to actually transfer vertically. So the things that I would look at doing with our front squats or having a good variance in is still looking at sort of like endurance work. Having the start of a program always wants to be higher volume, actually get the legs used to that. Having a good hypertrophy base where we can look at packing on as much muscle as possible. But then also as you go into our strength phases, reducing that volume right down, making sure that we can move heavy weights fast rather than always hitting a grind. So yes, leg strength is important. That's probably going to have a knock-on effect in the clean and jerk. But if you don't have good pulling strength, doesn't matter how strong your legs are, you're not going to actually ever have the opportunity to actually stand that weight up. So pulling strength, leg strength, they're both really important for your Olympic lifting movements. Question number 6. How do you know when you are ready to start lifting heavier weights instead of just practicing technique? Now, this person here, I know they've literally just started coaching with me, learning the Olympic lifting movements. So they're asking that question, when do you know that you can start adding weight on that bar? Now, if you've never done it before, you're never going to know. One thing that what I try and tell people when they learn the Olympic lifts is that it's got to be like a yo-yo, okay? It's not linear, so to speak. We are not looking to, increase that weight each week and allow it to go up. Ideally, that would work. But if you're new, you've never done these movements before, you're going to start with just the bar. Now the bar starts to feel good. You're making sure that the technique is absolutely perfect. That's the first thing. If you've got good technique on that bar, that's when you can start to add weight. And all you're going to do, you're going to add a couple of kilos on, see how that feels. If it's good, add a couple more kilos on. See if you can maintain the same movement quality that you did on the barbell. If you can't, you bring that weight back down. But you might bring it down a fraction, so it's still higher than the first set, but not as high as that second set. Third set feels good. You may stay there because that feels like the area that you can work, or you might need to drop it down or push it back up. So I would always say it's like a yo-yo effect. Now, as it's a yo-yo effect, as the weeks then progress, this yo-yo will then look as if it's going, increasing vertically. So the thing that we're looking for is the lighter weights are technically heavier than the lighter weights in the previous weeks, and your higher weights, your heavier weights, are heavier than the other previous weeks. So you're working within this sort of trough, but your training is still sort of linear. Okay, hopefully that sort of makes sense. But I wouldn't necessarily look to just go 15 kilos, 16 kilos, 17 kilos over a 3-week period. You might go 15 kilos on all sets week 1. Week 2, I'm going to go 15, 16, 18, 20. 20 felt shit. I'm bringing it back down to 19. Yeah, okay, that felt good. Stay at 19. So it's got to be that yo-yo. You've got to sort of see how it feels. And then your next session or the week thereafter, what you're probably going to start to do is bring it back a fraction. So it's heavier than where you started the week before, but not as heavy as where you finished week 1. And then you're going to work within that sort of. Next question. I've been stuck at the same clean and jerk for about 6 months. What's the first thing you'd look at to figure out why? Okay, you've been stuck at the same clean and jerk for 6 months. What is the limiting factor? Are you stuck because you can't clean the weight, or are you stuck because you can't finish the jerk? That's the first thing I'd say. If you never have the opportunity to do that jerk, you have some area of strength, potentially even endurance, getting good at moving weights in the clean. But if you're always cleaning that bar and failing the jerk, we now need to start to have a higher focus on the jerk to actually prevent that from being a weakness. That's the first thing I'd say. That's going to show us in our program what we are going to have a higher focus on. The next thing I'd look at is, why is it breaking down? What is the technical issue with that movement? So it might well be in the clean that the first pull, we're maintaining a nice back angle. As we reach extension, we're driving that bar away from us. It's looping around us. It's missing our shoulders. It's dropping forwards. That then shows us that second phase of the movement needs to highlight. We might look at hang snatches. Not snatches if we want to improve our clean. Hang cleans, block cleans, maybe even sort of high hangs to actually get used to where we want to find maximal power. Even looking at highlighting that area in floating clean grip deadlifts or just clean pulls and clean deadlifts, okay? Making sure that we are actually gliding past that area rather than banging off that thigh, causing that looping movement. And the same goes to the jerk. What is the limiting factor in the jerk? If the clean is good and it's the jerk that's letting you down, you need to try and do the exact same what I've just said with the clean, but finding out what is the limiting factor in the jerk, what movements can you do to overcome that issue? And then obviously you got your accessory-based movements where we're looking at strength. So again, very similar to the question before, that's when we want to look at pulling strength and squat strength. If your squats strength is limited, very close to your clean, it's going to be hard to get out the bottom of the clean, making the jerk harder. So these are the things that I'd start to look at, is making sure that your front squat is potentially 15% higher than your clean. If it's not, and they're both very, very similar, shows us that we need to build our leg strength. If your clean grip deadlift, or from the floor, is very similar to what your clean is, it just shows us that our pulling strength is the limiting factor. We need to try and build that. So look at the technique, or look at the clean and the jerk. Which one is the limiting factor? Which one's going to have a higher focus? Jerks is having the higher focus, but then the deeper dive in, what area of the jerk needs the higher focus? And then looking back on the bigger picture, where can we improve our strength to actually make sure that we can lift efficiently? That's a very good question. I like that question. Next one. Do you think CrossFit has helped Olympic lifting grow, or has it actually made technique standards worse? I like that question. I think weightlifting owes CrossFit a lot because it's advertised weightlifting and it's got a lot of people interested in weightlifting. And I think if it wasn't for CrossFit, weightlifting would be a dying sport. the majority of people that that I coach or have coached have come from a CrossFit background. They've come to weightlifting, they've enjoyed the weightlifting through CrossFit, and now they want to improve their technique. They want to improve their technique because, in my opinion, weightlifting is taught pretty badly in a lot of CrossFit gyms. CrossFit coaches all of a sudden now think they're weightlifting coaches, and they don't necessarily know the intricacies of the movement, and they just have a glazed view of those movements. The thing that I always sort of go back to, and I feel really, really passionate about this, is that a jack of all trades and a master of one. And I think sometimes CrossFit coaches are a jack of all trades. They're going to teach you gymnastics, going to sort of teach you weightlifting, and then teach you the CrossFit standards, and you'll be pretty shit at all those areas. I think to get good at weightlifting through CrossFit, you then need to start to look for the specialist. You don't ask a baker to do the MOT on your car because they've probably got more knowledge in baking bread than they have in the engine in your car. Same goes for weightlifting. Go to a weightlifting coach who specializes in weightlifting if you want to excel in that area of your sport. But you don't go to a weightlifting coach if your gymnastics is the limiting factor. So I think CrossFit has helped Olympic lifting grow as a sport and actually advertise the sport to a hell of a lot of people around the world. But you have found from people in CrossFit that have done weightlifting, the movement standards have dropped. But it's one of those. And I think it's then the savvier people that are in CrossFit then start to look at finding someone outside of CrossFit to help them then improve their weightlifting skills. Next question. Do you think the obsession with perfect technique can actually slow down progress for some lifters? I think I am definitely a coach that wants everyone to lift as well as they possibly can. I am always looking for people to strive for excellence, strive for moving really, really well in the Olympic lifting lifts. Sometimes, yes, I feel that you can hold back your progress by going, okay, my squat mobility is the limiting factor. I can't hit really good depth, so I am not going to progress my Olympic lifts until I get really good depth of my squat. The thing you want to do there is, okay, we're going to tentatively progress our weightlifting, so start to look at the other variants of the movements. But our program is still going to focus or highlight on areas that are limiting your ability to master the snatch, clean, and split jerk. So if it's mobility, you're not going to then work 12 months of mobility and not touch Olympic lifting skills because you want to get good. You need to get good at mobility, improve your mobility. That's then going to positively impact your weightlifting. But what you'll do is work on a few mobility drills, but then put yourself in the Olympic lifting movements, but then really try and force those good movements. Mobility has that idea of improving flexibility, but also by gaining strength by being forced into these positions where mobility is a limiting factor. That's how I would look. I think sometimes that we can obsess and prevent ourselves from moving forwards, but I think we always want to have in the back of the program or the back of our mind, this is what I'm striving for, but to get there, I've got to carry on pushing X whilst having a real focus on Y. Question number 10. How many times per week should you look to train to get better at weightlifting? This all depends. I don't think there is a magic number that someone should go by if they are looking to get good at weightlifting. The first thing, or the thing that I would ask you, if that is you asking that question, is how many times can you dedicate in the week for you to train? Now, when I say dedicate, I actually mean like how many times can you go to the gym and know full well that you've got the time to actually action the very best program, okay? Now, some people are, I'm really busy, I can only do 2. Perfect. If you can only do 2 sessions and they are going to be absolutely perfect, the quality is going to be better than the quantity, stick with 2 sessions. Some people go, yeah, okay, I want to train every day because that's good for my mental health. Okay, perfect, go to the gym. But you haven't got an hour to 2 hours to spend in the gym, absolutely fine. Those sessions are going to be shorter and we're going to spread your overall training volume across the week. We've got to make sure that your program is specific to you and your lifestyle. It's not about making sure that your lifestyle fits the, let me get this right. It's making sure that you are not looking to try and get your program to fit your lifestyle. Your program to fit your lifestyle to fit the program. Yeah, your lifestyle, I don't know whether I've said that the wrong way, and I don't even know. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that your lifestyle dictates what you can do in training. Simple as. That has got to be the first thing you've got to ask yourself. When you've asked yourself that, how many times can you dedicate? Remember, quality is what we're aiming for, not quantity. How long have you got? Can you train 5 days a week? Perfect. If you can, perfect. But how long have you got in those sessions? If we've got to reduce that down to make sure the quality stays high, fine. But if that makes you feel good that you go to the gym 5 times a week, perfect. If you can only dedicate 2 to 3 sessions, but they're going to be an hour to 75 minutes, fantastic. That's perfect. That is the program that is best for you. There is not one size fits all, and there is not one answer that I can give to you that tells you that everyone should be the same. Next question, final question. I feel like I've blown through these questions today. Why do Olympic lifters squat so much? And how important is the squat for improving the lifts? Go back to what we've said at the start of this program, start of this podcast, is that the reason why Olympic lifters squat so much is that they need to be efficient out of that bottom position. Imagine snatching and cleaning a weight overhead that is pretty flipping impressive. It's a big old PB, but you have not got the ability to stand up because your leg strength is the limiting factor. That is why Olympic lifters squat so much, especially to impact the clean and jerk. You might have a really good front squat that's higher than your clean, but it was a flipping grind, which now means that you're wasting energy trying to stand up your clean, making it harder to go for that jerk. You've got to get primed and have good capacity with your squats, not just strength. It's about capacity as well. So you can move efficiently in the Olympic lifts. Simple as. Damn, 11 questions. I feel like, that there's some really, really good questions in there. I've actually enjoyed going into a lot of detail on some of them as well. But yeah, as I always say, if you are a weightlifter that has technical faults, you feel confused, you don't know what you need to do, and you're starting chucking shit at the wall, hoping something sticks, I have got the OPTILIFT Performance Lab, which is a free community over on School. Inside there, I have got the weightlifting toolbox that literally is a weightlifter's dream. Okay, it has got everything involved in there to make sure that you can master the snatch, clean, split, jerk. Starts off with the foundations, making sure that you've got strong foundations. We then go through the building blocks, the movements. So that is how we start to structure the lift. How do we make sure that we can hit our foundations as then we start to progress into the full lifts, into the full snatch, clean, split, jerk. And then we finish off in the toolbox with all the common faults that I have seen amongst hundreds of lifters that I've coached and come across at competitions, etc., etc. So it goes from the early arm bend in the snatch, hips rising in the clean, pressing out your jerk, losing stability overhead in the snatch, rounding the shoulders, bar dropping onto you in the clean, losing the bar in front of you in the jerk. All common problems. The toolbox gives you all the cues, drills, and tips that you need to overcome them. If you want access to the weightlifting toolbox, I've added a link below to get access to the OPTILIFT Performance Lab, which is a free community. And then inside there, you then can get your hands on the weightlifting toolbox. And I've linked the link below in the caption. Go ahead and use it. Thank you very much for joining me for episode 21. 21 podcast, and 21 is a very good number. I love 21. It's a good old number. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, so you get notified when episode 22 and beyond comes out. See you in the next one.